We have a special guest. We're sneaking in here.
Well,
Thank
I know.
God.
We have another historian.
Yeah, this is Justin. Justin, come on up.
Yeah.
Justin Demetri.
Yeah.
He's our historian here at Maritime, Gloucester. What's up, bud?
Hi, Justin.
You're a historian kind of everywhere.
I do my best.
Yeah. Yeah, you've been around, kid.
So they tell me.
Yeah. How you doing?
Not bad.
How's summer going, man?
It's been a great first season here at Maritime Gloucester.
Yeah.
It's I got a great view. I get to come down to Gloucester Harbor again.
Yeah.
Yes, it's nice.
Unbelievable, huh?
Yes, and this is my first schooner festival as part of Maritime Gloucester. So it's so far so good.
Yeah.
Right.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So we want to talk about the international races.
Yeah, I would like to hear, or we both would like to hear, the history of, well, how the Schooner Fest connects back to, or the races connect back to the International Fisherman's Race.
It does, yes. Well, the obvious connection is the trophy. The winners of the big category, excluding Colombia, vie for the Esperanto Cup. And that is the trophy that was originally won by Gloucester Schooner Esperanto in the 1920 race, the inaugural fisherman's race. And that all started, of course, in 1920. As the story goes, the America's Cup race that year was canceled because the wind was blowing too hard. And that's something that happens even today. You know, I like to think of America's Cup, if that's Formula One, well, we got NASCAR. Or at least the beginning of NASCAR before they turned to stock cars, back when they were bootlegging. So what happened was, as you may know, we have a lot of family connections up north in Nova Scotia, especially Lunenburg. We all get a little bit of Lunenburger in us, I think. So they thought it was ridiculous that these yachts were canceling the race because it's blowing 23 knots. Because a lot of folks around here will tell you we don't get going until it blows 23 knots. So they ended up having their own race. And now fishermen's races, they happen on occasion when all the boats were in, or if there was a special event, you know, if enough of the fleet were willing to do it, sure, we'll all go for a fisherman's race. So that's a little different than a yachtsman's race. You know, you don't have the handicaps, you don't have all that kind of stuff. So there were some intermittently before that. But in 1920, this race, with all the vessels from Lunenburg and probably a few from Halifax as well, they had a great time. The winner of that race was a schooner named Delawana. The captain was Tommy Himmelman. And what really brought it into an international affair was after the race, the publisher of the Halifax newspaper, the Halifax Herald, I think his last name was Dennis, decided, well, let's make this more interesting. So he's the one that started, created the rules. He offered up the cup, the prize money, and then they telegraphed Gloucester. I believe they telegraphed the Gorton's office and said, well, we want to give you guys a shot for bragging rights of which vessel's going to really be the Queen of the Atlantic. We're going to have a race of real sailors, as they said. And so we had 2 weeks to respond, and it had to be a real fishing boat with a real group of fishermen on it. You know, no yachtsman at the helm, none of that stuff. And they had 2 weeks to respond. So the issue was in 1920. You know, we think of you know, the 20s is still the glory days of sail, but in reality, Gloucester was motorizing their fleet, and they've been doing that intermittently from about 1900, 1901 with the first engine-powered schooner, and then by World War I, new technology was arriving pretty fast. These engines were still considered auxiliary, so most of these vessels still the sails were the prime driver, but now you had a little gas or a small oil engine to move you around when there was no wind. With that being said, that's going to affect your sailing qualities. Now you're dragging a propeller. So Gloucester looked around and said, geez, we don't really have that many vessels that could qualify for this race. And as the story goes, that day, a vessel comes around Eastern Point, coming in from a trip, and her name was Esperanto. She wasn't new. She was built back in, I believe, 1907 over in Essex. So being nearly 14, 15 years old, she's about middle-aged, or a little over middle-aged for a working fishing vessel of that time. But the know-it-alls on the dock said, well, you know, she is fast, she's good to windward, and she's the right size. So they had enough time to haul her out on our railway. I believe it was our railway right here. I might be mistaken, but she was hauled out somewhere here on Duncan's Point. They had enough time to you know, give her a coat of paint, scrape the bottom. They stitched up her sails, and then they put Captain Marty Welch at the helm. Marty Welch was a highliner already by this point, although he did not normally fish on on the Esperanto. So he kind of learned her tricks heading up to the race course, which was off of Halifax. And after 2 races, it was over because she did a clean sweep, 2-0. So
Against the Delawana.
against the Delawana,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
So Esperanto sails back to Gloucester, and they say they had the broomstick up in the foremast for the clean sweep. Everyone had some prize money in their pocket, and of course they had the cup that is now on display here at Maritime Gloucester, and that's what we'll be awarding for the champion of the race this weekend.
And
Very
that's
cool.
the Esperanto Cup.
The Esperanto Cup. That's the cup. I've learned recently. That's the cup they gave to the captain. There is the bigger cup that stayed over in Canada, and so if you go up to the museum up there, I believe they have some of them on display.
So how did those captains who did not sail in the America's Cup feel about things when they heard that this race happened?
Oh, that's a completely different universe.
Right.
I don't think we've ever heard the
Yeah.
response because it's a completely different animal.
Yeah.
Those are very high performance vessels. They're done for the improvement of technology. This is all about fisheries.
Yeah.
And although these vessels were designed to fish, especially later on in the future races, after that first victory, the Canadians didn't like losing at their own game. Can't blame them. And so they build a vessel as big as the rules of the race would allow, and that's what we now know as Blue Nose. So after the construction of Blue Nose and her defeat of Elsie in 1921, it really became an arms race. And so we had to build what are called racing fishermen after that. The best example right now is the big replica of Columbia that's tied up down on the floats at I-4C2 right now. So that is not your typical sailing hull for fishing. That is more of what I would like to say on my tours. That's basically an America's Cup hull built out of oak and had to fish for a living. So I wouldn't say that the racing fishermen improved fisheries, but it was a subset. It was kind of how we ended the age of sail around here with these very unique craft. So there is kind of interesting America's Cup influence because besides the vessels built for fishing, these racing fishermen oftentimes were built by some really well-known America's Cup designers like Starling Burgess, who designed Columbia, Puritan before that, and then the disqualified Mayflower back in 1921.
Why was it disqualified?
Well, when they built her, which they built over in Essex, Mass, they built her in an incredible amount of time. I think it was like 59 and a half working days. This vessel was slightly bigger than the Blue Nose, and so it scared the Canadians. We here in Gloucester didn't like Boston guys getting in our own game. So there's stories of a little bit of a conspiracy. Now, it was easy because the vessel was not your prototypical fishing vessel for that time. She had very much 1920s yachting designs in her. Her transom was nothing that you'd see on a fishing schooner. She had really fancy laminated spreaders for her up on her masts. And of course, being from Boston, and she was what we call a fresh fisherman. So like Adventure, she's bringing in fish on ice, versus this was supposed to be technically salt bankers, the old school, going
Yeah.
out for months at a time.
Yeah.
So they found any kind of excuse to not have her race. And it would have been tight. That first race with Blue Nose and Mayflower, I mean, who knows what would it would have probably been down to the skippers in the end. But needless to say, she was disqualified from the start. And if you go back to the newspaper articles from that time period, you see, will she race? Won't she race? There might be a no trophy at hand. So they were trying to get her in the race. There was even one race where Mayflower shadowed the vessels in the competition. So that's but that's what happened. So it stayed a Gloucester versus Lunenburg affair by and large.
Gotcha.
So you mentioned the Elsie, and that is one of the ship models that Eric Ronberg
Oh yes, he has
created.
a really nice one.
Yeah,
up at
and
the
that's
museum.
at the Cape Ann Museum. Yeah.
Yep, she was one of the I would say one of the quintessential Gloucester fishing schooners from that time period. Really good looking vessel, nice round bow. She made a lot of money, which is really what it's all about. I mean, looks to count for nothing when you're on a fishing boat, but she had it all. And if vessels that were true fishermen stayed as part of the race, she would have had much more of a chance to win the cup. But Dana Story, the late great Essex shipbuilder, in his book on Columbia, once said, all things being equal, a good big boat tends to beat a good small boat. Elsie was 10 years older, and I believe probably 8 to 10 feet shorter on the water line than the blue nose. So you can go back to the race results, and you see even though she had good starts, the power of blue nose just took her over, especially on the windward leg.
Gotcha.
So you placed any bets on Sunday?
Oh, I don't bet on this, especially the way the race is.
Yeah, we wanted some insider info here,
Yeah,
man.
right.
Well, we have some favorites. Yeah, well, I mean, Columbia,
Right
of course, is a breed apart.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
why she has her own trophy to vie for until someone else wants to build another mega yacht of a racing fisherman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then we have a real challenge. But as far as the big vessels, I always lean for American Eagle because that was a family boat. My uncles, the Piscatellos, owned her before Captain Foss bought her and turned her into the beautiful windjammer she is today. My dad fished on her. My grandfather fished on her. And as a kid, when I was getting back into this subject as a 13-year-old, we were all on board when she won against the Ernestina back in 1989. So
Very
Wow.
and I think she's a
Cool.
perennial favorite for local Gloucester people as well.
cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
I like
great
that.
chat, man. I really
Yeah.
appreciated that.
Anytime.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll have to hit you up again. And how often are you down here at Maritime?
As often as possible. I'm here most days. If you ever want to do a guided tour, you can book ahead online, or you can just come on down. And if the sign is up, I'll gladly give anyone a tour, which includes out here on the Harriet Webster Pier and also our Gorton's Gallery upstairs.
Oh, great.
Great. Let's do that.
Yeah, nice job,
Yeah.
Justin.
Sounds
Thanks
good.
for joining us, man.
Anytime.
Yeah, enjoy the
Thank you,
weekend.
Justin.
I sure will. This is
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah.
All right,
Cheers.
Thanks, guys.
This episode of Cape Ann Today is brought to you by Bank Gloucester. Start here, get there.